can all join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. If you don't mind, just sit there. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Dharma Bum Temple. Hopefully that's where you all intended to be this evening. Just making sure. It's funny, usually when I'm doing my offering, and it's at that moment that whatever I'm going to talk about right now pops into my head. And then I'm like, oh, well, that's what I'm going to talk about right now. And as I was doing my offering, I got nothing. Nothing popped into my head. So now I'm apparently talking about what actually happened during the offering as usual, except there wasn't really much to share. And I'm totally okay with that. I don't know that you all are okay with that, but I'm okay with it. And then after I realized, oh, I got nothing in my head to talk about right now, my mind just immediately went to gratitude for the fact that we're all even here. And I don't mean like here physically in the Dharma Bum Temple. I mean, although that's really beautiful and nice also, but I just mean like that you're here. I mean, if you all just stop for a minute and recognize what a crazy journey you've been on throughout this life, like insane. And, we go through our days, and anyone in here ever complain about things? There are definitely chairs. So if you want to, yeah. So for those of you who might potentially complain about things, we go through our days and complain about little things here or there, or this isn't right, or that's not right. The Buddha called this dukkha. This is the discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction, suffering that we experience. We go through these things every day. And so we always pick at little things to complain about. And sometimes it helps to just stop and again recognize like, wow, I'm alive. I have made it through every difficulty, through every challenge, through every hectic experience, through every heartbreak, through every letdown, through every failure. I've made it through all of that. And you're still here. And I personally, and this was something that I had to do years ago when I started this practice, really, but once in a while it stops to just remind yourself that like you're doing okay. You really are doing okay. Because if you were not, there are chairs here if you want, or you can go straight to the back, either way. Yeah. More often than not, we don't stop to just say, I'm doing okay. And if you've chosen to come here on a Tuesday night at 7:00, even if your life is a complete mess, which it possibly could be. Are you smiling underneath that mask? Is your life a complete mess? Do I need to?
It just feels that way.
It just feels that way.
Yeah.
That's funny. Even under the mask, I saw the smile. That's like a colorful mask, Maybe it was the eyes squinting, and then I was like, I think he's smiling under there. So See, the picking on people, I still have the ability to pick on people. I just do it differently. But you feel like your life's a mess.
Right, but it's not.
But you feel like it.
Yeah.
Care to elaborate on that?
Just things that are just kind of out of my, I guess, control. I just feel like things are just kind of slipping away for me.
It doesn't feel that way. It is that way. Everything is out of your control. Everything. The illusion is this idea that you think you can control things. I saw this meme years ago, and I still think it's one of the best things I'd ever seen. And it's like, it's kind of making fun of all the memes out there. And it's this person like sitting on a beautiful beach and looking out at the waves, and and it says, relax, nothing is under control. So the problem is we think things are going to be under control. I feel like everything is out of control. It is. The mistake is that we fight to try to control it. And you can't. The only thing we can control is what? Our reactions, our thoughts, our words, our actions. This is what the Buddha called karma. That's all we can control, is what we think, what we say, and what we do. That's what we can control. But everything outside of that is completely out of our control. And once we I use the word surrender here, but once we kind of surrender to the truth and the reality that everything is out of your control except your actions, life becomes a lot more peaceful. And it doesn't mean that what you're saying is out of control and hectic or whatever. Isn't that way. It is, but you're embracing and you're welcoming the absolute madness that life is. And this is the Buddhist teaching on impermanence. Everything is changing, always. But we try to attach and control, and therefore we suffer. So you're actually right where you should be, with nothing under your control.
Great.
So perfect. Go have some pizza. Right. All right. So on that note, we'll close. We're done. We'll start with a meditation practice. A couple things I'll tell you before we begin. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice. You don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit. We're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are on a cushion, often it helps slide to the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten, shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or a chair, however you're seated, also just trying to straighten the back slightly, relaxing the shoulders. Hands are on the knees or the lap, whatever's comfortable. If you need to move during meditation, simply move. Movement doesn't make you a bad meditator, it just means your leg hurts. I will guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Most important, do not expect anything. We're just going to sit and breathe. And starting with the eyes closed, if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath, expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where's your mind? Return attention, focus to the breath. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments of the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert, aware of each sound. Each thought. each physical sensation, yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. With the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. The mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And as you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. And most important, with the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It has everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samutpata, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means very simply for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in and where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what we get. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way we responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your days. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun. Meditation is not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And very often that present moment is incredibly difficult and filled with challenges and chaos. And this practice is learning to be with things as they arise, not running from them. Meditation free, Buddhist practice free, sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else. That's the practice. And the beauty of it is we get to wake up, if we wake up each day, and we get to practice all over again. And for me, that's why what I started to talk about earlier, before I started picking on you, is to just be grateful that you've made it this far. That with all the challenges and difficulties, that you allow yourself time to do what we just did. And I get it. I always say we just sat and did nothing. And often people say they figured stuff out, or, I understand that we have experiences that are unique and individual and personal for all of us as we sit. But what I'm really getting at is allow yourself that time each day to just sit. And what I call do nothing, meaning just sit and breathe. And it doesn't matter if that's 2 minutes, if it's 5 minutes, if it's an hour, the amount of time that you sit and breathe is not important. What's important is that you create a way of life that allows you to at least give yourself 2, 3, 5 minutes to just check in with your mind and your heart and your body and just sit. Don't make it too complicated. Don't make it a big event, but just sit and abide in sensation of breath. And if you're wanting and going to think anything, at least take a few moments at the beginning of sitting to just be grateful that you're able to sit and you're able to breathe. Because I'm sure for many of us in this room, there would have been and potentially may still be moments in our lives where we didn't think we'd get this far. By this far, I just mean here. Not that you've made it to some grand destination, but we're here. And that in and of itself is a grand destination. As Suzuki Roshi would say, life as it is, that's the magic. There's nothing outside of this moment. So, learning to be with it, appreciate it, and always be grateful. And hopefully not so critical or hard on yourselves for things you've done or may still do. So, with that, I'll pause. I always prefer really to just respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind. And we'll use the rest of our brief time this evening, and I'll respond to your questions or thoughts.
What's your opinion on other forms of meditation rather than just sitting, such as walking meditation or lying meditation?
Yeah. So the question for those who didn't hear it and our millions of YouTube followers is my opinion on different types of meditation other than just sitting. I think they're phenomenal. There's thousands of types of meditations. I'm a big fan of people finding a meditation practice that works for you, meaning you'll do it. if anybody tells you that this is the way and the only way to meditate and then hits you up for a bunch of money, you should probably leave, right? Other than that, just recognize that there's different practices. You know, the Buddha taught very specifically sitting, standing, walking, lying down. And so to me, there's 4 examples, but also I look at it kind of big picture metaphor for everything is a meditative practice. So while you can very formally do seated meditations like we just did, you know, for me, I'm a Zen practitioner, which means it's silent. It's just observing sensation of breath, and that's it. Now, when I lead, I don't lead that type of practice. I lead a little bit of a guidance more for people who might be brand new, and also just to say things periodically, kind of like getting, you know, like a stick being hit, which just brings you back to present moment. Guided meditations are wonderful. Visualization meditations are wonderful. Walking meditations are wonderful. Laying down meditations can be wonderful as long as you're actually laying down and not just hitting the snooze button. You know, people say, I meditate before I get out of bed. Well, usually that's just like 5 minutes of snooze, and you know, we're calling that our meditation. Nothing wrong with that, but eating is a wonderful meditation practice, right? Meditation is a concentration and focus on the present moment. That's what I learned through Buddhist teachings. Concentration and focus on present moment. So if you look at that as a meditation, kind of a definition, if you will, of meditation, then anything you're doing, a conversation, a dialogue, can be a meditation. Watching a candle can be a meditation. Driving can be a meditation with your eyes open, of course. Everything is a meditative practice. So formal walking, guidance, things like that, yeah, definitely. And I work with a lot of PTSD, TBI, trauma victims, trauma survivors, military veteran, active combat folks. Very often when you're dealing with trauma, the only thing I will suggest or say is when you're dealing with PTSD, TBI, trauma, things like that, silence can be torture, right? When you're sitting in silence, what are you left with? Yourself. What are you trying to run away from most of the time? Yourself. So what do you need to learn to be with, I suggest? Yourself. So even if someone has a really hard time sitting in silence, I'm not suggesting that you sit there for 30 minutes in silence, because it's a nightmare and it can really cause tremendous trauma and flashbacks and things like that. But if you are someone who has a really hard time sitting in silence, try it for 30 seconds. Try it for a minute. Because if we're always turning towards some sort of guidance or some sort of movement or things like that, you know, Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, things like that. If we're always moving as our meditative practice, then we're still not really learning to be with just our thoughts. And so I think that part is very critical as well. That makes sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say the closest I come to any kind of actual meditation is martial arts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all of those.
Sitting quietly is difficult.
Say again, last part?
Sitting quietly for me is difficult. I can meditate martial arts, but I've done it long enough that now it's just natural.
Yeah, sitting quietly for a lot of people just sucks. You know, for people that are very active, ADD, ADHD, you know, sitting.
It's very focused. That's why I like it. But
What's that?
It's martial arts. It's the only time when I'm not thinking about something.
You're wrong.
Well, at least for me.
You're still wrong. And very rarely, if ever, will I say someone's wrong, because I have no idea what's in your mind. So let me preface like a little asterisk that says, I have no idea what is inside your head. But, right? So Bodhidharma, you familiar with Bodhidharma?
A little.
Okay, so Bodhidharma left India, walked to China, is credited for founding Shaolin Monastery around the turn of the century, right? He is, in essence, it's not the founder of what we call Zen, and then it was Chan, but that lineage, which goes back to the Buddha, which the Buddha held up a flower, and his disciple Mahakashyapa, it's said at that moment in time, there was a mind-to-mind transmission from the Buddha to Mahakashyapa, and nothing was said. That then went through a series of patriarchs. The next real famous one was Hui Neng. He was the 6th patriarch. Then you get to the 28th patriarch. This is all in India, of Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma leaves India, goes to China, brings what became Chan, is what it was called. In Japanese, they call it Zen. So Zen teachings, Chan in Chinese, and going back to the teaching of the Buddha holding up the flower, all of that is what is rolled into martial arts. Thinking is still occurring. You have to think prior to any sort of movement. You don't move on your own without your brain telling you to move. So thinking is occurring. But what I'm challenging you on is to recognize that while you say you're not thinking, you are incredibly focused. You're just not distracted by anything else, and you're focused on that movement. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Again,
Yeah. No.
so to me, it's not about debating whether you're thinking or not, but this is more for everybody than just you. But to recognize, the reason I want to point it out is that what you just said is very true, that when you're doing martial arts, a lot of people talk about swimming, for example,
Right.
that swimming is an incredibly meditative act because they just get lost in the strokes. It's a beautiful meditative act. Calligraphy, things like that. Thinking is occurring. What's not occurring is the monkey mind distractions, because if you have a monkey mind, a racing mind, and you're thinking about something else other than that movement during martial arts, what's going to happen?
You screwed up.
Yeah, you get knocked over, whatever it is, right? So now the practice really is to recognize, can you cultivate that same level of concentration and focus just sitting? It's very difficult. And the teaching in that lineage is, as Dogen would say, and he really brought the teachings into Japan, is he would say the body and mind fall away and you go beyond thinking. So you're so present in the action that you don't recognize in a way that you're thinking. So concentration and focus on everything you're doing. And in moments like that, it's very beautiful, because that is it. That's that meditative experience. So now, and what's your name?
Dylan.
Dylan. So Dylan, what other things in your life do you experience that same meditative space?
Well, so it's mostly martial arts, a lot of karate, but also do German long sword fencing. But I think otherwise it's like walking, or I don't know if reading counts. I think, kind of a segue, I think Buddhism is interesting. It feels existentialist. And I'm not that old, but that's kind of where I am now, because you don't get through life without trauma.
Yeah.
And a lot happens, and just bad things happen for no reason sometimes.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. I mean, things just happen. And yeah, it's beautiful to have that experience. So imagine that same, and we all have things in our lives where we're just so present with it. And it's almost as if nothing else exists, that we're just so present with what's happening. And that's really, I believe, the practice to bring into everything we're doing, which is not easy. And again, that's why I've probably already said 30 times not the word practice. It is a practice. So our life can be that meditative state, which is not checking out. It's not escaping. It's actually, as I said earlier, direct perception into every movement, every action, every thought, every word. So our entire life is a meditative experience. So, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, questions? Yeah.
So you talked earlier about, I have PTSD from earlier trauma, and you said you work with a lot of people who have those conditions. How do you do that? And
How do I work with them?
I thought I heard you say.
Oh, I did, but I'm just trying to understand exactly your question.
Yeah, how do you work with, what is the process? Especially, as you say, sitting in silence can be torture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what and I'm okay with that. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What that whole process
Sure.
is about.
I mean, without getting too far into it, 25 years ago, starting group homes, working with adolescent females who've been physically, sexually, emotionally abused. Fast forward to 15 years ago, for about 10, 12 years, working with, like I said, active and military veterans coming back from combat. I listen. I sit, I listen, I guide to meditation, and I remind them that their feet are on the ground and they're present. So when I say I've worked with that population, all that really means is I don't understand anything that they or anyone in this room is going through.
Right.
We cannot understand what someone else is going through completely. We can listen, we can be present, but you could talk to somebody every day for 50 years and you don't know what they're really feeling.
Right.
Right? So when you're dealing with PTSD or anything like that, the practice is to be present here, because sounds trigger, gone. Sights trigger, gone. Smells trigger. When I say gone, meaning the mind, right? And all of a sudden you're reliving the event over and over and over again. And so the practice of meditation, coming back to the present moment, is recognizing that all the anger, all the sadness, all the depression, all the trauma, everything we've experienced, where is it? In the past. And all the stress and fear and anxiety and worry about it occurring again, where is that? In the future. So intellectually, it's starting with understanding that the meditation practice allows us to be present and say, look, right here, right now, any sort of past trauma is not occurring. But what will make it occur? This thing, the mind. And so it's a constant, and I mean that I kind of brushed over it quickly, but since you bring it up very specifically, I mean that very seriously about people dealing with trauma, is that silence really can be dangerous. So one, and each person is different, one has to determine on their own what length of time of silence is healthy and what length of time is unhealthy, and at what point in time are guided meditations, if someone is into meditation practice, most important. Because when you're being guided in meditation, what are you focused on?
The present.
Yes, but it's more specific. The words, yes. You're focused on what they're saying. And that is in the present moment. And if you're focused on what they're saying and you're in the present moment, what are you not focused on? The past. So that's where the guidance will be critical, right? So if I was leading a group specifically with that population, the gaps of silence that we have here tonight probably wouldn't be longer than 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. But again, a lot of that is me assessing the population and understanding where they're coming from, which again, you only know from listening. But each person is different. Does that kind of address your question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, thanks. Other thoughts, questions? Meditation, Buddhist practice, anything you're sitting with?
Got a couple new statues up there.
Yeah.
Of last year.
Yes. So we can't get anything past y'all, You're pretty quick. Let's see, today's Tuesday. Saturday, it was asked also, and they arrived the Monday prior. So yeah, they've been here 8 days. They're 8 days old in the Dharma Bum Temple. So you're pretty quick. Yeah. I think I messed with last Saturday and told them they've been there for months, but they're 8 days old. They are what we would refer to as Dharma Protectors. And so, it's the Dharma Bum Temple with different Buddhist traditions, different lineages, different backgrounds. And so these are typically seen in the Chinese, also Japanese tradition, and their name is Hong and Ha. And they are very fierce protectors that keep everything safe. So they were beautiful gifts that we are very happy to have here. So if you were worried before, you got nothing to worry about. That's it. See how easy that was? Yeah. Dharma Protectors. Yeah. There's also a lot of, it's funny that nobody's ever really asked about it. But when you walk into the temple and you see that black Buddha that's sitting on the shrine there, and that was always the one that was in the window of the old downtown temple. Right above him, there's a scroll, and that is another Dharma protector that has always kept us safe too. So yeah, very traditional temple pieces and styles that they'll put outside. sacred spaces. So, yeah, lots of symbolism. Yeah.
So, given Dharma Protectors, in Buddhism, is there belief in a higher power? Is it all in the present moment? Or
Sure.
Dylan raised an interesting point about being existential. How do you respond to that?
Notice I didn't respond to that at all, right? It's the beauty of sitting up here. You can just, yeah.
Cool.
Next question. No, this one's pretty straightforward. It's so to give a little bit of background again for anybody who might just be brand new, like night one to Buddhism. The Buddha himself, he was just a dude. He lived in India 2,500 years ago, 500 years before Christ. He was a prince. He lived a princely life. His father was a king. That's what made him a prince. And he lived that life for 29 years old. For 29 years. 29 years old, he sneaks out in the middle of the night. He sees what's called the four sights. I'm expediting this story for time's sake here, but he sees old age, sickness, death, and he sees an ascetic, kind of like a simple nun or a monk. And he goes back to his buddy and he's like, hey, they never allowed him to see old age, sickness, or death because they wanted him to become a king. And they knew he had a very gentle heart, that if he saw suffering in the world, that he probably wouldn't want to be a king and rule. He would want to be a wise sage, which is what was predicted when he was born. So he comes back to his buddy Chanda and he's like, what is this old age, sickness, death stuff? I've never seen any of that. And Chanda says, yes, my lord, that happens to all of us. We all, we will age, we will get sick, and we will die. Nobody can escape that. And he said, well, I can't live a life anymore of worldly pleasures as a prince, knowing that there's a world of suffering out there. I want to figure out why suffering exists. So he leaves home at 29 years old. He roams the base of the Himalayan mountains for 6 years. At 35 years old, he has what's called the awakening, which just means he figured out why we suffer. And his first teaching, which is up on above the exit sign up there, he taught the Four Noble Truths. That's the first thing he taught to his first 5 disciples. And he said, life is filled with dukkha, suffering, discomfort, angst, dissatisfaction. It doesn't mean all of life sucks. It just means, as we all know, we're going to struggle a lot throughout our days. And some of the suffering is intense and extreme, and some of it is like you just don't like the temperature, or you don't like the mayonnaise that's on your sandwich. We go through a wide range of dukkha in our lives, some extreme, some relatively meaningless. The second thing he said is, what's the cause of suffering? He said, we suffer because of greed, anger, and ignorance, and that's why we suffer. We always want more. We're angry at the way things are, and we're ignoring the truth. And we're stuck on how we want things to be instead of how they actually are. The third thing he says is, what's the ending of suffering? And that's the good news: liberation, nirvana, freedom from suffering. And then the fourth thing he taught was Eightfold Path. This is all basic Buddhism 101. You can Google it. It's all there for free. And the Eightfold Path is having the correct views, thoughts, speech, action, livelihood, effort, mindfulness, and concentration. This is basically your karma, your action. It's what you do with your body, speech, and mind. It's what you think, what you say, and what you do. So the Buddha said very clearly, if you want to end suffering, and I like to look at it as just suffer less. I didn't wake up today thinking, like, is my suffering going to end today? Is it time yet? It's already November, holidays are coming. Can I just escape from this human realm and end suffering, right? I just think, can I suffer less today than I did yesterday? And the way we do that is by practicing generosity, compassion, and wisdom, which is overcoming the greed, anger, ignorance, right? So then he taught for 45 years that in 84,000 different ways, as it said, and then he died when he was 80, okay? So to the question of the higher power, the God, things like that, the Buddha was raised Hindu. That's the religion that existed in India when he was born. He was raised with beliefs in all the Hindu gods and goddesses. Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, Lakshmi, Saraswati, there's a lot of Hindu gods and goddesses, endless. And he was taught to believe in all of them, okay? Buddhism didn't exist when he taught. He was just some dude teaching. It then became called Buddhism. They called him the Buddha, which just means the awakened one. His buddies were like, hey, there's Siddhartha. He looks like he's figured something out. Let's go sit with him. And they said, wow, he's figured out some good stuff. We'll call him the Buddha, the awakened one. So that was the name they gave him. Then he dies at 80, right? He was asked 12 questions he wouldn't answer. And one of them was, again, in India. So everybody, for the most part, the people there believe in Hindu gods and goddesses. And they asked him, should we believe in gods and goddesses? And he said very clearly, I'm just a human. I am no god. I'm no goddess. I'm just a human. If you want to believe in gods and goddesses, do that. If you don't, don't. That's up to you. I'm here to teach you how to live a kind, gentle, morally ethical life. So he didn't touch that, right? By definition, in our context, in kind of a Western world, a belief in a higher power is a belief in a God. In Buddhism, there is no belief in a God. You're on your own, dude.
If I understand it, Buddhism not considered a religion, rather than a practice?
So the follow-up question to everything I just said, which usually starts with that, is, well, is Buddhism a religion or a philosophy?
Right.
Okay. If you go to Thailand today, if you go to Taiwan today, if you go down the street to any Thai, Taiwanese, Chinese, Vietnamese Buddhist temple, and you go in there and you tell them this Buddhist stuff is just a philosophy and not a religion, it's kind of like going into a Catholic church and telling them it's not a religion.
Right.
Buddhism is one of the world's oldest religions. Just because it doesn't have a belief in a God, by definition, we could say, well, by definition, it's not a religion. Now, the flip side is, most Western people who come into Buddhism, was anyone in this room raised Buddhist? Not a single hand. I won't put you all on the spot here, but I'm pretty certain the majority of the people, I've been doing this for the last 18 years in this city with people who weren't raised Buddhist. Most people come into Buddhism later in life, they're not so thrilled, or they have their religion, but they're looking for something else. And they justify it, and they're like, well, I'm not into religion, but I like Buddhism because it's a philosophy. So Western people tend to justify it and call it a philosophy because it makes them feel better, because they don't like religion. So here's what the Dalai Lama said about all of this. Does that make sense so far? We will justify it however we want. Someone asked the Dalai Lama years ago, they said, does this country, the US, need more Buddhists? He said, the world has enough Buddhists. We don't need more Buddhists. This country needs more people who are peaceful and happy. So Buddhists don't care if you call it a religion, if you call it a philosophy, if you call it a way of life. It doesn't matter. Whatever you, not just you personally, but whatever the individuals have to do to justify in their minds and their hearts being okay with Buddhist teachings, phenomenal. Years ago, a friend of mine, she's Catholic, and she got into Buddhism, and it became very important to her. And she referred to Buddhism as a software upgrade. She said it actually brought her closer to her Catholic faith. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of utilizing and using Buddhist teachings. I do a lot of interfaith stuff, and the Buddhists are not wrapped up in people being Buddhists. They're not on the street corner saying, come join us, we're Buddhist, right? Use Buddhist teachings as tools to be kinder, gentler, happier people. And if that brings you closer to Christ, then God bless you. You know, I'm a Jewish kid. They call us Jubus, right? So whatever and however you utilize Buddhist teachings in your life, that's what's most important. I've lived in, monastery life, heavy religious Buddhist practice. There's devout faith, devout belief. There are Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and there are rituals. You could walk into, cultural Buddhist temples, and you'll feel like you're at a Catholic church with all the incense and all the bowing and all the chanting and all the rituals. There's all of that going on. You know how much of that goes on here at the Dharma Bum Temple? You saw it. That was about it. Because most Western people don't want to bow and chant and put on robes and say a bunch of stuff in another language. So we built this place to kind of strip out the cultural barriers that really hinder people from learning what the Buddha taught. The people who come here aren't Buddhist, and we're not here to make you Buddhist. But I sure do hope you're nice to people, And often people will ask, what did the Buddha think about Jesus? Well, the Buddha was 500 years before Jesus, so he didn't have much to say about it. It was a brief conversation, It wasn't born until 500 years later. So the general kind of scholarly view, stuff you read, will say that Jesus, from the Buddhist lens, was a true bodhisattva, a fully enlightened being. That's kind of the general Buddhist view, scholarly around the world.
Which is who Buddha was.
An enlightened being.
Yeah.
All right. So if you take a lot of the heavy stuff we throw on religion and you just look at what did Jesus teach, what did the Buddha teach, pretty similar stuff.
Yep.
Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a great book, which is not on my mind right now, but comparing and drawing a lot of parallels between Buddhism and Christianity. So does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anything else before we close? Good questions. Yeah, I think it's last thing I'll say is I like to, especially when things like that are asked, for me and in Buddhism in general, lineage is really important, and the history of Buddhism is really important. You know, we're all here exploring Buddhism to bring it into our lives because someone was born in India 2,500 years ago. And then 100, 150 years later, the teachings went south into Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and then went to Japan, a couple hundred years after that, and then made its way west 200, 150 years ago. So I like to really give a lot of respect to the lineage and history of Buddhist teachings, which really is a religious experience for millions of people for, over 2,000 years. So I never want to dismiss that part of it. But again, as I already did, give also rise to the fact that nobody here, for the most part, is here because they want to be this heavy religious Buddhist. Most people are here because they just want to be kinder and gentler to themselves and hopefully others. So stick with that practice. Yeah. All right. So we'll join palms. We'll close on that. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to the more than 4 million lives that have been lost during this pandemic, and to their family and friends who continue to suffer to this day. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. So a few quick announcements before you all head out. Thanks for being here. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma bum. We opened this temple coming up on 15 years now to introduce Buddhist practice to local folks who show up. So thanks for showing up. We appreciate it. Just about every night we have different practices going on, different unenlightened folks leading their own approach to Buddhist teachings. Tuesday night, this Wednesday, Alex does a metta, loving kindness practice. Thursday, Travis does the Dharma Bum basics and meditation. And then I lead again on Saturday morning. Everything else is online. As most of you know, we shut down for 16 months completely. The temple, everything was closed. We built a whole virtual temple, which was really beautiful during a difficult time. Now that we reopened about 3.5 months, now we have 2 temples. We have an in-person one and a virtual one. So anything that's not in person, we have about just as much going on virtually as we do in person. Tuesday night downstairs, as well as Sunday morning, we do a recovery sangha. So anyone battling addiction, drugs, alcohol, life, whatever it may be, we have quite a large recovery community as well. So again, Sunday morning in person and Tuesday night in person. Other than that, Buddha for You also is closed during the day, just like the temple. Opens Saturday and Sunday, 12 to 3, and then an hour before class. Temple still is closed all day, unfortunately. We sit 8 to 8:30 and 8:30 to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday. And then it's shut down all day until the evening time when we have a class. So we miss the days where we could just open and be open from 8 a.m. to 9 o'clock at night, but we're not quite there yet. So
Are you still doing the first Saturday of the month silent?
no, we have not restarted the Day of Silence retreats yet. We have not restarted a lot of things. We were definitely on the conservative, very cautious side of things through this pandemic, and we still are. We appreciate you all having the masks and sitting spread apart. That's why I moved you, so nothing like I didn't just want you there, but we have to do what we believe will make people comfortable. And with our Saturday morning schedule, which has 40 people here, to then add another 30 on top of that for a retreat, it just doesn't flow so well. So we're not there yet, but sit tight, and hopefully over the next few months, we may start that again. Yeah. So yeah, it's a 4-hour Day of Silence retreat. It just requires a lot of resources and movement through the temple that we're not ready to welcome yet. And we like the fact that 40 people can come in on a Saturday morning and feel comfortable being here. Right? As I said to you all earlier, as soon as we open things up and it becomes a free-for-all like it used to be, majority of the people that are coming here won't be comfortable coming here anymore. And then we're kind of back to square one where I'm talking to myself. So and that's annoying. So thank you all for being here. Be well, good luck, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Good to see you. Glad you're here. What's going on, man?
I just want to thank you very much. You make it great.
Did that help?